Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Family Wealth and Other Musings. I am your host, Becky Easton, and today is Thursday, and I wanted to tell you a couple of stories about some people who did some planning, not with me. Stories about kind of friends of friends. And in one event, the planning did not work for the family, and in another, it is currently working. And so as a reminder, this isn't legal advice specifically for you because I don't know your specific situation. And so I definitely encourage you to reach out and speak with an attorney if anything that I'm saying piques your interest or makes you want to have further conversation. So the first story that I want to talk about involves a friend of mine's nephews. Each one of them recently inherited about $400,000 from their father upon his death. And all three of the boys were really struggling with addiction. And Dad knew this. So he built a provision into his trust that said that they could receive each of their inheritances outright as long as they could prove to the trustee that they were clean and sober for 1 year. So the first son, the youngest one, had no problem meeting the requirement. He had watched his brothers suffer from addiction, and so he was clean and sober, but he was also only 18. So when he turned 19 and received his inheritance, he promptly got married, had a baby, used his whole inheritance to buy a house with his young wife in Connecticut. And unfortunately, it turned out that his wife was an addict, and now he's stuck in Connecticut with an addict wife, a huge house that, while he has no payments, is half hers, and he's working a job that he doesn't like while going to school and supporting his young family. So it doesn't really sound like something that his dad would have wanted for him, and probably not the choices he would have made if he had not received an outright cash distribution at the age of 19. Then there's the middle son, who managed to get himself clean for a year, got his full inheritance outright, and 1 year after that has blown $120,000 on a relapse and is now a full-on addict again, blowing through the rest of the money. And again, probably not exactly what his dad would have wanted. Then we have the third son, who has still not received any of his inheritance. Continues to work a full-time job while in the midst of his addiction. And maybe he'll manage to get and stay clean, but it kind of looks unlikely. So what could Dad have done instead? Well, he could have set up a lifetime asset protection trust for his sons, where he appointed a trustee to manage the assets for them, not just for the financial return, but in a way that could have incentivized, educated, and inspired these boys to become more in their lives. Sometimes the people that we love need protection from themselves, and being able to provide for them in a way that doesn't enable a dangerous lifestyle is something that many of my clients are looking for. And the same type of planning can also protect your beneficiaries from outside creditors and divorce, and even simple accidents. So this next story is about a guy who's 33 years old. He had received an inheritance several years prior in a lifetime asset protection trust. And if he had received an inheritance as a part of a traditional distribution plan with a third at 25, half of the balance at 30, and a full distribution at 35, he would have already received 2/3 of his inheritance with the balance along the way in 2 years. And he would have lost it all. Because here's what happened. He was staying at a friend's penthouse apartment, went to run himself a bath. While it was running, got distracted by another friend who came over and invited him to go out. He thought he had turned off the faucet and left the house without his phone. When he returned at 4 a.m., he found out from the doorman that the entire apartment had flooded. It turns out that the faucet hadn't been turned off and the bathtub didn't have an overflow drain. The damage was to the tune of more than $1 million. a simple mistake. The insurance company is paid, but now they're seeking reimbursement from him for just over $400,000. And if he had had an inheritance left to him outright, it'd be gone. So with a lifetime asset protection trust, instead of distributing assets outright at any age, you provide that the trustee can only make discretionary distributions. And this is very important. Anytime the trustee is required to make distributions, such as of income, then those assets are available to creditors or spouses in the event of a divorce. But if distributions can only be made by the trustee on a discretionary, fully discretionary, completely up to the trustee basis, then the assets are fully protected. And this is the best and most airtight form of asset protection possible that you can leave for your beneficiaries. The inheritance is completely protected from bankruptcy proceedings, creditors, or judgments, and can't be touched in the event of a divorce. And why is this? Because the beneficiary never owns the assets. They never have, and they never will. And this type of trust, that really is the difference. And because this type of trust is something that you would be setting up for someone else, not a trust that you would set up for yourself while you're alive. There are certain states that have asset protection trusts available. You're looking at Nevada, or I think it's North Dakota, a few others that have these domestic asset protection trusts that are available, or you're looking offshore to do something like that. However, those are, that's when we're looking at spending quite a large sum of money on asset protection. That's not really our everyday type of protection that we're looking at. Definitely part of the conversation at some point, a good thing to be aware of. However, as I mentioned, not exactly everyday planning. So your regular revocable living trust doesn't provide asset protection for you because you have owned those assets. And whereas with a lifetime asset protection trust, the reason that it does provide such nice asset protection for your beneficiaries is because they've never owned those assets. And so they're just being used for their benefit. They could run through the whole thing. They could spend the full amount during their lifetimes, or if they don't, it can be set up to pass down, not unlike a dynasty trust, pass down to your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, like that. So I really love this type of planning. I think there's just a lot of room to be thoughtful and to build out, not necessarily like an incentivized trust for how they can get their inheritance, but at least setting different kind of milestones where if you were alive, how would you be providing for your children at certain times? How would you provide for them if they wanted to open a business? Were they getting married? Were they buying a new house? Were they going to school? Things like that. And it gives you a really nice opportunity to protect their assets for them. And again, another thing where it's not, you might think that this is something that is more for higher net worth families, but not necessarily, because sometimes the risk of losing a smaller inheritance is greater. It's much easier to have that lost to a divorce, creditor, bankruptcy, whatever. And it's also not necessarily about protecting the assets from your children, because I think maybe a lot of you are listening thinking, well, my kids are super financially responsible. They are doing really well for themselves. I absolutely trust that that they would do everything right. I'm not worried about giving them a lump sum of money. I trust them, which is great. I love that. However, it's not so much about even protecting it from them, because this is really just a benefit. There's a possibility to have them named as a co-trustee or even as the sole trustee of these assets, so they would still be able to have that, full control of the assets. And then if any of these situations arose, they could step back and appoint somebody else, an independent trustee, to start acting. And, in that event, then protect those assets. So a lot of really good things. Again, this is a type of trust that I absolutely love putting in place. I think it makes a lot of sense, depending on what your goals are in leaving an inheritance, how you want your assets to pass. So if this is something that sounds interesting to you and you would like to talk to somebody about it, I encourage you to find a personal family lawyer near you. You can go to personalfamilylawyer.com and search for a personal family lawyer. And also, if you happen to be in Arizona or Colorado and you'd like to discuss this further with me and see how I might be able to help you, then I'd love to chat with you. And you can hop on my calendar by calling my front office at 480-999-4455. And again, just remember that this isn't specific legal advice for you. You definitely want to talk to an attorney about your specific situation before you make any decisions. And other than that, I think that's about it. We'll wrap it up for today. And again, if you would leave a review for me on whatever platform you're listening on, I'd love to hear what you think about the show, because I'm definitely having some fun with it. So I hope you are as well, and you're learning a little bit every day as you tune back in. So thanks again, guys. This has been another episode of Family Wealth and Other Musings, and I'm your host, Becky Easton. Have a great day.